Happy birthday, Ashley. I hope this year is one of the best ones yet. We're sending you lots of love. And can't wait to meet you soon. Bye.
Free-spirited, flowy, and fame-appropriate, the boho chic aesthetic could also be known as the cool girl aesthetic of the mid-2000s. Formulated by 2000s boho celebrities, it was first noted in early 2005, but was gone by the end of 2006, making it more of a micro-aesthetic. Yet, despite its short life, it was super impactful and a really interesting example of celebrity influence on the decade. So let's dive into it and deconstruct the bohemian trail it left behind. Background. We can begin by breaking down the term boho chic. Boho is short for bohemian and was used in the mid-19th century throughout Europe to describe groups of people who challenged the certainty of conventional society by living on its outskirts, in such positions like artists, travellers, muses, and philosophers. Bohemian subcultures then had various manifestations throughout the 20th century, including 40s hipsters, 50s beatniks, 60s and 70s hippies, and so on. Throughout history, they have long been a point of fascination for the rest of the world, fulfilling fantasies about living a carefree and adventurous life. Chic, meaning stylish or sophisticated, refers to the element of celebrity elegance within the aesthetic. The boho chic aesthetic was formed by a number of 2000s bohemian dressing celebrities, with the key exemplar being Sienna Miller. Her fame rose in the mid-2000s after her breakout roles in Layer Cake and Alfie, a high-profile relationship with Jude Law, and, noticeably, her style. Miller's combination of hippie pieces and impeccable attention to detail when it came to accessorizing made her style stand out in the celebrity sphere. And then there were other celebrities who helped form subcategories of boho chic, such as Kate Moss's boho rock, which was a combination of boho and harder rock elements, Nicole Richie's West Coast boho, or boho meets California girl, and Mary-Kate Olsen's bobo chic, a term that mixes boho and bourgeois and referred to Olsen's super relaxed boho on a wealthy celebrity. These celebrities made bohemian dressing extremely desirable in the mid-2000s. Miller's style in particular was so sought after that by the spring of 2005, boho was so ubiquitous in clothes stores, its buyers were being referred to as Siennas. This example of celebrity power demonstrates that fashion was no longer dictated by large fashion houses, but by what Shane Watson referred to as the triple F formula: famous and fashion forward. Consumers were no longer interested in certain styles or brands, but also if anyone famous was wearing them. In other words, it wasn't just that these girls were able to capture the bohemian fantasy in their wardrobe, but that they were also super famous, and this element of celebrity glamour and the aesthetic put the chic in boho chic and made it what it is: a hippie aesthetic perfectly reflective of the 2000s celebrity mania. Clothes. As in all my videos, I like to contextualize the influences of the style before diving into specific items. The boho chic aesthetic draws its inspiration from both bohemian styles and celebrity chic pieces. The bohemianism is mostly influenced by 60s and 70s hippies, who were attempting to embody anti-capitalist, vagrant, and alternative lifestyles. Accordingly, they borrowed fashion from non-Western and often nomadic cultures in an attempt to create a multicultural style that challenged Western conventionality. These included the traditional dress of Romani people, who originated in North India and migrated throughout the world living nomadic lifestyles, a variety of areas in Asia where Eastern philosophies and religions appealed to hippie sensibilities, components of Western wear that romanticized the idea of a free-roaming cowboy, and so much more. While this combination of so many elements might seem chaotic, it's important to note just how influential hippie style was. I'll get into this more when I eventually do a full video on the hippie aesthetic, but for a subculture, it's one of the most recognizable and loved of all time. Bohemian aesthetics have long had a tendency to do this, primarily because of the sense of freedom, adventure, and escape from conventionality they evoke. And the hippie aesthetic was so good at doing this, it has been repeated in various ways ever since the subculture fell out of prominence in the 70s. In the 80s it looked like this, in the 90s it looked like this, and in the 2000s it looked like boho chic. As boho celebrities began to wear typical hippie pieces, they added the element of chic by occasionally mixing it with high-priced luxury items, and other items that were highly associated with celebrity culture. We'll see many examples of this element of chic within the boho chic as we go along, but let's get started with specific items. Skirts and dresses. Perhaps the most iconic piece of clothing for the 2000s boho chic aesthetic is the Roma skirt. It is originally a vital piece of clothing for Romani culture, believed to have originated in India and often worn to help Roma women appear modest. It was then appropriated in the 60s by the hippie movement, drawn to its free-flowing style and association with nomadic lifestyles. It therefore makes sense that it made its way to the boho chic aesthetic of the 2000s as they tried to emulate their hippie predecessors. Tops. Firstly, there were lace camisoles, which were historically a Victorian undergarment to clothes, and therefore might have been a nod to the bohemian roots of the mid-19th century. They were usually in baby doll style, whose history I covered in the coconut girl aesthetic, and there were also tank tops, representing the influence of celebrity on the aesthetic, with these tops being a must-have for 2000 celebrities, as I talked about in the McBling video. Pants. Flared jeans were sometimes styled boho chic as an alternative to skirts and dresses. While they originally came out of the US Navy in the 19th century, they were mostly known in the Western canon through the hippie aesthetic of the 60s and 70s, who subverted the style as a part of their anti-establishment ethic. They were also a new style of denim to previous generations, and so were often embellished, personalised, and celebrated for their scruffiness and oversizedness. The boho chic aesthetic wore them in honour of their hippie roots, particularly by Mary-Kate Olsen, who often wore ripped and oversized flares. Mid-calf cuffed jeans were also popular, particularly when worn with cowboy boots. This makes sense considering these jeans were originally worn by cowboys in the late 19th century, before being adopted by youth in the 50s and 60s, and so they suited the vintage and Western aspect of the aesthetic. Outerwear. Bolero jackets were a key item of the boho chic aesthetic, both in a crop style and above the waist. It takes its design from the matador's chacotilla, which was originally designed in the early 19th century for bullfighting as a light and easily discardable piece of clothing. The style made its way through Europe and by the early 1860s was adopted by high society French women, and they were then seen again in the 50s, 80s, 90s, but by the 2000s the jacket's ability to create both a sophisticated and an artistic style makes it boho chic perfect. Providing a similar silhouette to bolero jackets were small shrug cardigans that were often tied, a nod to the hippie styles of the 70s, and there were also oversized cardigans who provided a more shabby bohemian aesthetic. And lastly, there were vests. I've covered their history a bit in the hipster video, but their background in hippie folk fashion of the 60s made them perfect for the aesthetic. Not to mention, vests were sometimes worn by Romani cultures in the 19th and 20th century. Accessories. Jewellery. Long beaded necklaces are quintessential to the aesthetic. Glass beads have been a part of Western civilization since the Middle Ages and were particularly popular with hippies in the 60s, who would often layer these necklaces and wear them very long, inspired by Romani styles, which the 2000s boho chic aesthetic aimed to emulate. Equally fundamental to the aesthetic were chunky bangles, seen across many boho chic outfits. The bangle mostly originates in India as early as 2600 BC and has held cultural significance there ever since, particularly around weddings. 60s hippies adopted the style, demonstrating their love for Eastern styles, and the boho chic aesthetic adopted this, also stacking the bracelets high on their wrist or high on their bicep. And lastly, there were chandelier earrings, originating in places like the Middle East over 2,500 years ago. The style was brought over for Western countries after British colonisation in the 18th and 19th centuries. Its roots in non-Western fashion made them ideal for both hippie movements in the 60s and the boho chic revival of the 2000s. Belts. During the mid-2000s, concha belts were a staple red carpet look within the aesthetic. With the Spanish word for shells being concha, it's said that during the mid-19th century, Navajos learned to make the belts from Hispanic artisans in New Mexico. In the hippie movement, a demand for the belt as a piece of Western fashion kicked in, and then later it was perfect for the Western and hippie-loving boho chic style. More general Western-style chunky belts were also a popular component of the aesthetic, likely inspired again by hippie styles of the 60s who incorporated the accessory, and there were also scarf belts that were often used to enhance the free-spirited boho look. Shoes. Firstly, toe-ring sandals were especially popular, inspired by hippie fashion in the 70s who were drawn to its eastern origins, as it was first known as a kolhapuri chapel dating back to 12th century India. Then there were cowboy boots, who played a big part in the aesthetic. They can be traced back to those who migrated to southern parts of the United States after the Civil War and wanted appropriate boots for horse riding and ranch life. Designers in areas like Texas and Kansas created boots with a high top to protect legs from snakes, pointed shoes for sliding into the stirrup, a slanted heel to hold onto the stirrup, and so on. Then, as Hollywood westerns took off in the early 20th century, the style became well known and was eventually adopted by hippies in the 70s. Therefore, for the boho chic aesthetic, they were an accessory honouring the hippie appreciation of Western wear. Tall boots were also seen in the aesthetic, which makes sense considering they were a big component of 70s hippie wear. And finally, there were Ugg boots, whose history I covered in the McBling video, being a massive celebrity trend of the 2000s, and therefore perfect for an aesthetic that combined typical boho styles with celebrity fashion. Bags. A bag that was iconic during the boho chic aesthetic was the hobo bag. While the term today usually refers to homeless people in a derogatory fashion, and therefore we probably need a new name for it, it originally denoted a particular kind of homeless person who would hop freight trains looking for work, often carrying a bindle on a stick, which is where the bag gets its silhouette from. Suiting the desire to look nomadic, the bag was ideal for the 2000s boho chic aesthetic. Due to the component of celebrity luxury within the aesthetic, certain it bags, as in designer bags that were in high demand, were also incorporated thanks to boho celebrities. These bags contained more bohemian aspects by being understated and vintage style, in direct contrast to flashy, logo-flaunting McBling bags. One of the most popular of these for the aesthetic was the Balenciaga motorcycle bag. Released in 2000, legend has it that the design was actually almost scrapped until Kate Moss saw a prototype and fell in love, making the fashion house realize its potential. The bag became the epitome of celebrity bags by the mid-2000s, and was extremely popular in the aesthetic, perfectly mixing boho shabby distressed leather and tassels with new celebrity wealth and luxury. As its designer Nicolas Josquier said in 2001, it was no logo, very light, very effective. There is something familiar with the vintage side. Other popular styles included the Chloe Paddington, a millennial classic that sold out instantly when it was first released in 2005, and the hobo style 2005 Fendi Spy bag. Miscellaneous accessories. There were two items I covered in the McBling aesthetic that also had a strong place in boho chic. Newsboy caps, which were a trend directly honouring hippie roots, and oversized sunglasses, made especially popular by Mary-Kate Olsen and came mostly from hippie styles of the 70s. Additionally, scarves, both thick and thin, were popular, particularly if they were street-sweepingly long, as per Mary-Kate Olsen. Hair and beauty. When it comes to the 2000s boho chic hair and beauty, the more natural the better. Similar to the coconut girl aesthetic, long sea-wave hair that looked like it had dried naturally in the sun was super popular, as were various styles made popular by hippie movements such as braids within the hair and two pieces of hair pulled back to the side. Sienna Miller also helped popularise curtain bangs, which were reminiscent of swinging 60s hairstyles of Françoise Hardy, Brigitte Bardot, Jane Birkin, and Patty Boyd. One hair accessory made popular in the aesthetic by Nicole Richie was hair scarves. While the hair scarf I covered in the preppy aesthetic was more about conservative femininity, the history of the boho hair scarf takes a different turn. Hippies in the 60s used the scarf as a countercultural statement against what they perceived were the clean-cut hairstyles of society. They were also likely taking inspiration from Romani dress, which has long included headscarves. In terms of makeup, the aesthetic was very minimal. However, you would sometimes see a use of smudgy smoky eyes in earthy brown tones. The smoky eye goes back to the thick kohl eyeliner of Egypt, but it also became big in the 20s thanks to movie starlets wanting to make their eyes pop on screen, and then again in the swinging 60s, which emphasised big eye makeup and experimentations with smoky colours. It therefore makes sense that the trend sometimes made it into the 60s loving boho chic aesthetic. Other visual cues. Being papped with an oversized beverage to go with your oversized it bag was an iconic part of the boho chic look, made popular from the paparazzi photos of boho chic celebrities. The decline. In early 2006, Sienna Miller told Vogue, "No more boho chic. I don't want to wear anything floaty or coin belty ever again." And by 2007, it was clear she had adopted other styles of dress. With its key influencer moving on, the aesthetic was out of style by the end of 2006, lasting only a couple of years. I usually take a look at flaws within this aesthetic, and within this one there are 4 I think that are worth noting. Firstly, this aesthetic was a prime example of fast fashion during the 2000s. It was mass-produced by cheap clothing companies when it was popular in celebrities, and quickly discarded by companies and consumers when it wasn't. As Jane Shepherdson, brand director of Topshop in the mid-2000s said, "When Sienna wore that gilet, we had to pull them forward fast. Girls see it and they want it immediately." This approach to fashion is still a massive issue today and is extremely detrimental to both the environment and human rights, leading to massive waste and exploitation of human labour to produce new items as soon as possible. Secondly, some of the traditional dresses of these cultures, such as that of Romani people, were used to identify them for persecution, and this is something that is still happening in parts of the world today. Such appropriation of their dress demonstrates the privilege of those who adopted the aesthetic. As Helen Graham puts it in her book Heritage as Community Research, non-Romani people can dress up gypsy for a day with no serious repercussions, but when a Romani person dresses in traditional clothing, or even a semblance of it, the response can be brutal. Thirdly, some aspects of this aesthetic, such as Mary-Kate Olsen's boho chic, came off to a lot of people as romanticising dressing poor, and giving the illusion that elements of poverty are a choice and something to aspire to as a form of rebellion. This is a broader issue of the bohemian sensibility as well, as it is often made up of wealthy people living in poverty to pursue artistic endeavours, always having the option to leave poverty while people in real poverty cannot. And fourthly, during its heyday, the flowy and loose styles with big bags, big sunglasses and big coffee cups were often used to make fun of Mary-Kate Olsen and Nicole Richie, and how much bigger their clothes were than they were. It's really important as we remember these aesthetics that we don't romanticise the parts of its history that mistreated women and ridiculed their bodies. With all these flaws included, boho chic was a short but impactful aesthetic of the 2000s. Remnants of boho style remained into the late 2000s, with folk smock tops and flounce hem dresses of 2007 and 2008. This demonstrates the power of the boho fantasy that never has and probably never will go out of style completely. Bohemian fashion will forever be a place for those to escape conventionality and cast dreams upon. And the boho chic of the 2000s, in all its it-girl glory, was perfect for this fantasy. What do you think about the boho chic aesthetic? Let me know in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe. Thanks for watching.